What if the biggest obstacle to your future isn't what you see, but what you're choosing to believe? Hey, City Heart family, welcome to After the Message, where we take what we've heard on Sunday and we actually talk about it in our everyday lives and how we can apply it. So my name is Cameron.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
And we're excited that you joined us for another After the Message. These episodes are so encouraging, and we know today is going to be no different. So we ask that you would just receive now and just open up your heart to what it is that the Lord wants to share with you today. We believe it's going to be special. So this week we continued the summer remix series, which has been absolutely amazing. Yeah. Every single sermon, Pastor Steph, has been so good. It's been such a blessing. And we actually got to hear from Pastor Daniel Owabdi, who we love so much, Pastor Steph. He's amazing. And he shared a message called 2020 Vision, the Life of Joshua. And it was probably one of the most life-changing messages I've ever heard. So shout out to Pastor Daniel Owabdi. We love you, brother.
So good.
Love you and Pastor Lacey so much. And so I'm just going to jump right in, Pastor Steph, to some questions. And let's just, me and you just dialogue a little bit here.
Yeah, I love that.
Because there was so much shared, I know. And you and I talked even prior to this podcast just about how inspired we was, just about this idea of 2020 and believing the word, and not just about what we see in the natural, but what God said. Yeah. What a way to walk by faith and live, right? Not just about, because it's easy to go by what we see, right? I don't have enough of this, so I'm not enough of that. But really it's about what has God spoke to your heart? And I think that's what we have to remember. Maybe somebody needs to hear that today. What has God said? Not just what you see, but what is he said? And so I want to talk a little bit about Joshua. It says Joshua lived through the exact same slavery, wilderness, and hardships as everyone else, but he responded differently. So Pastor Steph, when we think about this, okay, so we all have seasons of wilderness, right?
Yes.
Hardships, slavery, right? Things that we just feel like, man, it's a hard place. And so Pastor Steph, and I'm kind of ask this in a twofold way. One is, what made Joshua different from the rest of Israel? And I'm going to ask it like this too. How do you handle seasons of hardship and wilderness? How do you keep your faith? How do you keep what God said in front of you when the thing that you're believing God for hadn't showed up yet? And I know that was a loaded question, but I just wanted to tie all that in together.
Yeah. So one of the main things that I saw when we were going through the message yesterday was Joshua's placement was different, right? Like, he stayed in the tent. He stayed at the tabernacle. Like, he was in proximity to constantly hearing what the Lord was saying, what the Lord was revealing. Yeah. And even when Moses left, he stayed. And so he wasn't constantly having the masses whispering in his ear. And I would be curious, because really it's just him and Caleb that came back with a good report.
Yeah.
But you don't see Caleb mentioned anywhere.
Wow.
So I don't know if they had conversations and Caleb caught that, like whatever, had been instilled and produced in Joshua. But what I looked at and noticed when I was reading through the word is he was in proximity to the presence of the Lord.
So important.
And so I think that's a huge factor, because there are going to be lots of things in our life that want to distract us from what we're supposed to be setting our hearts and our minds on. And so if you're constantly being pulled and untethered, I guess, so to speak, from the cornerstone, right? From what the word has said, from who Jesus has already established himself to be. And something Pastor Owabdi said, he's like, hey, if you're not getting a rhema word, or what's we call a spoken word, like from the Lord, then go to the Logos, go to the written word, right? That is an anchor for us. But if we're constantly filling our minds with, what is the news saying? What is society saying? What is culture saying? What are my friends saying who may not be saying what the Lord said? Like, that's such a key thing. And I know the scripture, I'm going to bring this out because this was so impactful when I was reading through the word and going through the Bible, like even the first time I was going through it. But it's still impactful today. But, there's an account in the Old Testament about a young prophet that goes up to the northern kingdom. This is after Israel has split. And so you've got the southern kingdom and you've got the northern kingdom. So this young prophet goes and delivers the word that the Lord told him. But the Lord specifically spoke to this young prophet and said, do not stop for anything. Deliver the word and you come straight back.
So good.
Okay, well, there's an older prophet that's living in that northern kingdom, and he stops this prophet. And he's like, oh, no, but the Lord told me something different. He said to come to my house. I want you to come and eat with me. And so at first, like when he first had the invitation to stay and eat, the young prophet said, no, the Lord told me to do this. Then the old prophet lied and said, no, actually, the Lord told me this. He said it was okay for you to stop and eat at my house. The young prophet dismisses what the Lord had already spoken to him because he heard a word from someone else who should have been more established, who should have had more maybe authority over him, and he stayed. And I'm not saying this to be like anti-authority. That's not what I'm saying.
Right.
But what I am saying is like that young prophet dismissed what the Lord had told him.
Wow.
To listen to what the older prophet said, who wasn't even being truthful. And what ends up happening is he denied what the Lord told him to do, stayed, was disobedient, and on his way back, he was eaten by a lion. I know that's probably really heavy for this podcast, but that's something that I think about where I'm like, Lord, what did you tell me? Because what you've spoken to me, the dreams that you've put in my heart, the assignment that you've placed on my life does not necessarily align or look the same as the next person beside me.
Wow.
Even if it's my best friend, even if it's someone that I've known for a long time, even if it's somebody who's well acquainted with me and like loves me and knows me and is maybe even like in ministry with us, or they love the Lord just like I do. But the thing is, if the Lord didn't say that to me, Jesus, why would I change what he's already spoken?
Oh my gosh.
And so when you're thinking about why Joshua maybe had a different narrative, even though he lived in the similar circumstances, because his focus was on something different.
Wow.
It wasn't on the murmuring. It wasn't on the complaining. It wasn't on their circumstances. It was on being in proximity with the Lord.
Oh my gosh.
So that's the answer for the first part.
Pastor Stephanie Reynolds just preached the whole sermon. As you can see, this is why I love sitting with her and talking. It's so powerful. You said so much and it's so loaded, and we got to hang there for just a sec, Pastor Steph, because I love how you talked about what did God say, because even sometimes people, whether, not even just lying, but people sometimes with good motives, right? Yeah. But they're not necessarily being sensitive to the Spirit. How does here's another question. How does a person stick to what God said despite noise? Right? Because you're saying that, okay, if somebody would say, well, God told me to do this. Okay, here's a really good example. Yes, God told me to go start a ministry, but people told me it wasn't logical. It's not time yet. You don't have the resources. You're this. How do you deal with the tension, Pastor Steph, of I know I heard from God, but because it's so easy for people that you admire or respect or who do have some level of spiritual authority, which, as you said, I love that. We're not anti-authority. We need that, right? Absolutely. And we're called to submit to leadership. But there are moments, right, that God will tell you a thing and instruct you to do something, and sometimes people don't get it. They mean well. How does a person deal with the tension of, I know you mean well, but God said this, and how do you still honor the person, right, and their legit concerns, but also sticking to the reality of what God told you to do? How do you deal with that tension?
Yeah, so just thinking about things in my own life, like I believe there are things that the Lord showed me that I'd be doing when I first got saved, that it didn't mean I was supposed to do it the next day. Right. And so there is wisdom in having the proving ground, having that training ground, and not being in a place where you're ever prideful and thinking like, oh, well, I've got this because the Lord showed me, I'm just going to barrel through everything. Right. There is a balance to this life. Absolutely. And so while we can have radical faith, sometimes our radical faith is also it's going to look like submission.
That's right. Absolutely.
Right. And so it doesn't necessarily mean even submission to man, even though that might be a part of what the Lord has established, but it's submitting to the Holy Spirit. Yes. And he's not a God of confusion.
Come on.
So if he's told you something, he's going to bring confirmation on things.
Yes.
We just need to be careful that we're not looking for things to confirm what we've already decided and what we've already dreamed up in our own heart. And we need to make sure it's actually confirmation of what the Lord has said. And so if you're called to ministry, if you're called to start a business, if you're called to do whatever, the thing is the calling is going to be there, whether it's today, next week, 6 months from now, a year from now, right?
That's right.
Or if you're like, oh, I believe this is the man I'm going to marry. Well, that's also true in 6 months, in a year. Like the Lord doesn't change his mind because you don't
That's
do
right.
something about it in the next 24
That's
hours.
Right. Wow, that's
but
good.
But I think what's really important is taking what the Lord has shown you and submitting it to his plan, submitting it to his timeline.
Wow.
And so, yes, he can show you a thing. He may be bringing other people alongside to help you in that development. But like, I'll use this example, and I'm so appreciative of this, but there was a time when I was living in Ohio. And, at the time, like, if you love Jesus, you go to Bible college because that's just what you do. And then you go into ministry because apparently there was no other way to love Jesus and serve him outside of being in the local. And I am joking, but, like, it just did feel like that was kind of like, absolutely. Oh, that's just what you do.
Yeah.
And so, my heart was very much like, well, gosh, I love the Lord. And I did see myself in ministry. There were things that the Lord showed me when I got saved at 17 that I would be doing, which didn't make sense to me, but he showed me some things. And so, of course, I'm like, of course you go to Bible college. Of course you get training. Of course, And so I literally had just gotten done working my last part-time job. I was working multiple to, pay bills and stuff. And so I was about to move off to Oklahoma, and I was about to drive like 16 hours from Northeast Ohio to Tulsa, Oklahoma. And did not have another job to go back to. So it's a Wednesday night. I remember that specifically. And service was to start. I was about to, serve with the worship team for the last time. And our senior pastor and his wife pulled me into their back office. And they're like, Steph, listen, I said, they were like, every time we pray about it, we just don't have a peace about it. But I love that they said this. They're like, hey, but we're people. We can miss it. If the Lord is still telling you to go, you go. You need to follow what he said. And I value that so much about them because they could have just been like, we forbid you to go, or we got this from the Lord, so you're not supposed to. But they wanted me to know that I'm hearing for the Lord, or from the Lord for myself. Yeah. And I love that they were even humble enough to say, you know what, we can miss it. Yeah. Because we can. We can. And unfortunately, like, that's not our goal or aim. Right. But I love that they left room for that to say, but if the Lord is still telling you to go, like, you don't have a peace about this, like, go. We support you. But honestly, that was the first time I had a peace about not going. And I had been anxious for a couple of months. And I was like, maybe it's just because of circumstances and, like, the circumstances about moving and, like, not knowing where I'm working or living when I get out there. There was a lot of unknowns tied to that, which I've been in seasons like that before. Yeah. And I continued to follow what the Lord said, and the Lord lined things up very, very timely. Come on. And so I just assumed this would be the same thing. But as soon as they said that, I had such a peace about not going. But also I was like, I have no job to go back to. I'm still going to have rent to pay. I'm still going to have bills that are coming up. And the Lord, that's a testimony for another time. But he was so faithful in that. But I think all of that to say is, there's going to, like, I think the biggest thing is, there's a verse in the word that says, let peace be the umpire of your heart. And I just had this conversation with my kids. I was like, what is the role of an umpire? It's to determine the calls, whether that hit is in or out, whether that ball is in or out, whether that play is in or out. And so if he's the umpire of our life, like, I want him to lead all of my decisions, all of my steps, because I want him to determine, was that in or was that out? Ooh. And so if he's telling you to do a thing, and, like, okay, so when he told me to stay in Ohio after I graduated college, I had a lot of people in my life that were like, I mean, not necessarily in Ohio, because they're like, yes, please stay, but, like, family. And, like, this guy I'd been dating for almost 3 years, like, none of them were on board, But I had to know this is what the Lord told me to do. Yeah. And even if they were saying something opposite, there was already such a confirmation, an affirmation in my heart of, like, no, I know that I know that I know. I heard the voice of the Lord on this one. Yeah. And I know that it doesn't make sense. I know it doesn't sound logical, but I know this is what I'm supposed to do. And so I remember having to respectfully tell family members, I'm like, I know that this may not be something that you understand, but I just trust and I know what the Lord is telling me to do. And it's like, me not coming back home is not me not loving you or not appreciating you or valuing you, but I have to do what the Lord told me to do. Absolutely.
Wow, I love that, Pastor Steph. That's so good. You said so many things that was rich, and I want to get into this because one of the strongest ideas in this sermon was that Joshua spent 40 years in slavery, right? 40 years in the wilderness, and only then stepped into the promised land. And Pastor Daniel talked about the process, and I love it because you said, I got a word from God, but most, and I would say probably 100% of the time, is the reason why we haven't yet probably stepped into the word that God said, because we're still in process. God's catching up, I think, what did he say, our character to our calling, right? Yeah. And that's important because it's easy for people to jump into things, but you don't have the integrity, you don't have the character, right? And so let's talk about process a moment, because I don't think that's a thing that most people like, because most of the time when God says something, we do think it's supposed to happen immediately, and we realize that God is not microwave. He's more like crock pot. He takes a lot more time to do things, but his timing is not because he's trying to hold things up and delay things. Right. Like sometimes we have this idea, well, God, you're holding me back. No, it's that God is actually preparing you. And we all need a process. I mean, even Pastor Daniel talked about the process that he had to go through before he became a pastor and a ministry leader. And I want to talk about that for a moment, because process is real. And I don't want to get into anything that I'm not ready for, Pastor Steph, because motivation and ambition is not enough to keep me in a place. Right. So I want to ask this question. I want you to dig into this because you have so much wisdom. But why do you think, and I'm gonna ask this and then rephrase it too, but why do you think God often cares just as much about the process as the destination? I'm going to also ask it like this. Why is it just as important, the process, as the destination? The destination is important to get to. We all got a place we believe God's taking us, but the process is also just as important. I think we think the destination is important, but also the process is important. Why is that? Why does God care about it? And why do they go hand in hand? Yeah, well, and let me say this too before I get into that answer. I think sometimes we think of our purpose and our calling as being one destination, and it's not. Right. It's actually a culmination of seasons in our life, right? So, like, I think you and I were talking about that a little bit earlier before we started recording, was, I found that different seasons of my life found me still connecting people. Yeah. Right? And I still loved connecting with people. I wanted to know who they are. I wanted them to feel seen. I wanted them to be known. But it actually started a lot earlier, before I even knew the Lord. Wow. Right? Wow. It was actually born from a season where I was bullied a lot, like growing up as a kid. And I think that is what fueled this desire and this love for people to be seen and known and not left behind or forgotten. Yeah. But over the course of time, the Lord has refined that to also include healthy boundaries, or knowing what people need instead of assuming I know what they need. But again, like, the process of that has come through a variety of seasons and also a variety of purpose. So my purpose in my earlier 20s and how I connected people looks very different than it does today in a different decade of my life. And so, I think that's one thing that we have to remember is, like, we don't reach this ultimate one purposed calling that we're always trying to, like, finally reach. It's like, no, you're actually operating your calling in a variety of seasons of your life in different capacities. I love that. So I wanted to clarify that for anybody who might be like, well, I just feel like the Lord has called me to this. Great. This is also still preparation, and you're still utilizing and operating your calling. I love that. In a different capacity. Ooh, I love that. So the Lord is so invested in our process because he doesn't want us to crumble. He doesn't want us to be this empty shell, right? So, like, you can have all the passion, you can have all of the motivation, you can have all this zeal, right? But if it's not housed in something that's full of integrity, if it's something that's, and I think my husband even talked about that at one point when we were at the old building, when he was talking about the integrity of a structure, right? So, like, the density of a sphere, if I have a balloon, is going to be different than, say, like, the density of a bowling ball. Yeah. Right? Because it's filled with something that makes it sturdier, makes it, like, heftier, right? My gosh. And so the Lord wants us to be in that process because he wants us to be filled with substance. So when the pressures that come against us in the call, in the purpose, it doesn't crush us. Oh my gosh. That's why I believe he cares so much about the process, so we can withstand the pressure that comes with answering the call. Ooh. He just loves us too much to let us stay in a place that's not good for us or others. Yes. So I think that's, again, like, to answer that question, that's why he's so invested in the process. He wants us to be filled and built with integrity and, honestly, humility. Yeah. If you're not going through some stuff that kind of cuts you down, because when you first get saved, at least that was true for me, I was like, so full of confidence. I'm like, all right, I got this. Like, I know whose I am. I mean, there was just this almost like
I really, and I mean, even before I was saved, like that was like operating in pride was something that the Lord had to deal with immediately because He knew, like, hey, for you to do this next thing, we're gonna have to cut this out, like a cancer, okay? And so, you know, it was so important for Him to teach me what I needed to know to prepare me for even the next season I was about to be in, or even the current one. Because again, I know I've said this before. But He just loves us too much to let us stay there, you know? And I love that about Him. But He's so like, hey, this can't be something that you carry into this because it's going to hurt you and it's going to hurt others. And He loves all of us too much to let that be a hindrance.
Wow.
There's so much to say about that.
That's really good,
but
Pastor
He cares
Steph.
about.
He does, yeah. He cares just as much about your heart as He does about the things places He's taking you, what He's doing in and through you. And that's such a good reminder. And, you know, I love that. God's not just trying to take us somewhere. I'm His son, right? And he's not just concerned about where I'm headed, but He's concerned about what's going on in my everyday. I love that. Oh my God. So we got just a few minutes left, and this has been so good. I want to tell you, this has been rich, y'all. I've been blessed, Pastor Steph, by this. This is like filled my cup again. And so let's get into this. I want to ask this last question here because I think we're talking about Joshua. And I want to shift to Jericho because Pastor Daniel talked about that. Before the wall of Jericho fell, God told Joshua, see, I've given Jericho into your hand. Yeah. So the victor was declared before anything changed physically, okay? And so here's a question I want to ask you, is why do you think God often asks us to obey before we see results? Because there may be somebody listening going, you know, this is all good. I love you're talking process and all these things that God's doing, but I don't yet see the results of what I'm believing God for. I know I'm supposed to take God at His word. I know I'm in process. I know God's doing things, but I don't see anything that matches what God said. And that's maybe a real place for some of you this morning listening, or this afternoon, or tonight, or whatever time you're watching this. You know, you may be in a position where you feel like, you know, God has said something, but it doesn't even seem like it's possible. Man, Pastor Steph, there's a lot to say about that because there are seasons where it's just like, okay, let's take Abraham and Sarah. It's like, you're going to have a baby. How? We're old and we're rusty. How in the world is this going to happen? So speak to that a moment, Pastor Steph, what do you think God's trying to do with that? When he gives you a promise or a word or something to declare and hold on to, but it doesn't match, but the current season doesn't look anything like that. How do I handle that?
Yeah, well, you know, I would say you're in good company because, you know, there's so many times we can read in the Word where people did not see with His sight. He wants us to have His vision. Wow. And so one of the things that I was thinking about, and please forgive me, I can't remember if it was Elijah. I think it was Elijah, but he had a servant with him. And he's like, oh my gosh, we're surrounded by all these enemy, you know, these enemy armies. And then like he already knew something that you know, his support guy did not, right? He's like, okay, he's like, Lord, open his eyes so he can actually see what's around us. And so when the Lord allowed his eyes to be opened, right, and reveal what was happening in the spiritual realm, he saw that there were actually angel armies surrounding the enemy armies. And what was surrounding their enemy was far greater than what was surrounding them.
Come on.
And so, but until then, he only knew what he could see with his natural sight.
Yeah.
But Elijah was like, hey, I know something. I have a different set of lenses that I'm looking through. I want him to see the same thing. And I think the Lord is asking us to see with his line of sight. I mean, you think about when the children of Israel came up to the Red Sea.
Yeah.
I mean, I know what they saw. Yeah. And it was a whole sea between them and another, section of dry land. Wow. But like the thing is the Lord is always going to do something that surpasses what we can see. Right? I love that verse that says, behold, or see, I am doing a new thing. Do you not perceive it? And so when we're thinking about what he's asking for us to do, he's asking us to see things the way he does, even though his ways are higher, even though his ways of thinking are higher, his ways of doing are higher than ours. Yeah. He still is inviting us into that process of being bold and having his line of sight versus what we see in the natural. And that's why I think in Hebrews 11, when it's talking about faith faith is a substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not yet seen.
Wow.
Why? Because we're looking through a natural lens.
Wow.
And he's asking us to be transformed by the word. Ooh. And he wants us to have his line of sight versus just something basal that's not even like in his realm of reality.
Oh my gosh, that's so good. So you're saying, Pastor Steph, is what God wants us to do is actually live from a place where we're seeking his vision. Like, that's a different type of living than just what I see in the natural. I'm always in a position, because God's always speaking, right? So I'm always in a position where I'm going, okay, Lord, I want to live by what you said and what you see despite what I see. Yeah. Because, my vision and God's don't always line up. Sometimes I'm just looking at what I see. And that's why Isaiah, in the book of Isaiah, says that God's ways are higher than ours. His thoughts are higher than ours. And so I feel like maybe God is calling us up, and as we get ready to close, I want to get into this because one of the things that several times that Pastor Daniel mentioned in the sermon that keeps us from hearing God is self-seeking, right? It's self-righteousness, focusing on what we can see instead of what God said. And so I want to encourage us, right, to really get in that place of truly, honestly seeking God. And looking at God and hearing from him and not just going by what you see. I feel like there's a transformation that's happening even now, Pastor Steph, where God is like, hey, let's shift from just the natural living to God, I want to seek you, okay? Yeah. And so someone maybe right now feeling inspired or wondering, what do I do next? Okay, what's one practical step that you could begin this week to start living a life of walking by faith and not by sight, right? Is there any scripture on your heart that you can hold on to, right? This week, and I really want you to get that in your heart this week. And some of y'all, I think, need to go back to even the dream table, right? And say, God, I'm dreaming with you again. I've allowed my natural sight to cloud vision, and sometimes that can happen, Pastor Steph. Is natural sight can cloud vision? I think we got time for one more question. We got like 2 minutes, but I got to get into this, okay?
And we have to put ourselves on a
this
timer
is like you have to answer this in 1 minute, Pastor Steph, but I got to get to this, okay? So our spiritual vision obviously comes from prayer, meditation, and fasting, right? Why is all that so important to connecting us, being able to hear from God and see it from his perspective? What is our prayer life and our word life, and how does that help us see God clearly?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it definitely changes the way we see things and the way we think about things. And again, when we even go back to the first thing that we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, like, why was Joshua's mindset so different from everybody else's? Yeah. Because his mind was meditating on something that was beyond what everybody else was focused on.
Yes.
And so when we look at and I love science things too. Like, I love that term neuroplasticity, where it's talking about how your brain actually has the capacity, really at any age, to reform, to retrain, to make new connections and build new neural pathways.
Yeah.
And so we're not limited, is what I'm hearing, right? Yeah. It's just even something that the Bible has said from get-go, like science is, catching up. Wow. And so, it's already affirming what the Bible has already established, and that's we can be transformed by the renewing of our mind. Yes. But we don't do that without being in the Word, right? Ooh. Because it's so counterintuitive to our nature, right? Yes. To our natural born nature, to think in ways that he thinks like, or to do what the Word says. It's very counterintuitive to how our bodies or our minds would naturally be maybe lean towards. Yeah. And so it is important, because it's like if you're trying to build something, but you never go to a planner, you don't have an architect who's like said, hey, here are the building plans. Yeah. You have an engineer who says, oh, these building plans are structurally sound, but you're just trying to wing it. Like my kid who took pallet boards and decided he was going to build himself a hut in the side of our yard next to our house. Like, that was not a structurally sound piece of, like building or something. Right? There was no structure, there was no foundation, there was nothing that established that. And so if you're trying to build these things, first of all, I would question like the things that you feel like you're called to. Then are you building up your own thing? Are you building up your own image? Are you building up your own I guess reputation? Like, is it about you, or is it about the Lord?
Oh, that's so good.
Even if it's things that we think are in the natural, like I want to start a business. Okay, cool. That's great. But the Lord is still in it. Yeah. There's still a bigger purpose than you being able to say that I started this business and I've been able to make it this amount of money, or it's your purpose. The call is so much bigger than you already.
Yeah.
At least it should be.
Yeah.
And so if it's bigger than you, why would you not go to the one who is already bigger than you to give you the blueprint of what you're supposed to do? But you can't get that if you're not in communication with him, if you're not reading the word, if you're not in prayer, if you're not seeking his answer, his direction, then what are you building, right? The word even says that those who build without him, right?
Yeah.
They're building in vain.
Wow. So
if he's not in it, you're building in vain anyway. So go to the builder, go to the master architect, and get the blueprint.
Wow. So good. Okay, Pastor Steph, that's our time. It's so good. So here's the spiritual challenge, okay? Wow. What is the wall in your life that you need to deal with, right? And that you just need to give over to the Lord and say, hey, Lord, I'm giving you this, right? I believe that God has shared a lot with us today. We got a lot to meditate on, Pastor Steph. And that's my prayer, is that you would take this today, right, and you would meditate on this to really see it. What's hindering you from seeing the God's way? That's the best question I can have for you. And that's what I want you to think about this week, and say, okay, Lord, this is what's hindering me from seeing it the way you want me to see it. I challenge you to write that down. I challenge you to find a word to stand on, a word from God, a word from God's word that you can stand on, that you can believe for, so you can ponder on and process all throughout this week and say, you know what, this is not going to hinder me from seeing God correctly, but posturing yourself in a place of prayer is the most important. So
yeah, and that's a great segue into Refocus that's starting
absolutely.
Starting really soon, actually.
Absolutely.
It's starting on Monday.
That's right.
Before we close, I just wanted to thank Red Squared so much for this opportunity to be here. And they're just I know we say this every week because it's so true. They're such a great, incredible partner to City Heart. We're actually recording right here in the hangar. And, they just do such great content.
Yes.
That reaches people in our city and beyond. They're a full-service video production and communications firm. They're all about powerful storytelling and helping organizations communicate with clarity and excellence. So we're just so grateful for the support. If you have any video communication or podcasting needs, you can visit redsquared.co. Again, thank you so much, Red Squared. We love you. Guys, thank you so much for joining us for this episode today. Our heart is that you would hear what you're hearing on Sunday or even through this, and then being able to carry it throughout your week and practically applying it in your everyday life. Those messages aren't meant to stay just on a Sunday morning. Right. And they're definitely meant to be walked out, right? Don't be just hearers, but be doers. So, we just want to encourage you, ask the Lord, what is he asking from you? What is he desiring from you? What's that next step? If you have a dream, you feel like you have something that he's revealed to you about your purpose, your call, give it to him, because he's not going to just be like, hey, this is what you're going to do, and not be invested in the process. And he wants to walk it with you. Yes. So I hope that this was an encouraging time for you guys as much as it was for us. I could sit here for another 30, 40 minutes and not think twice. But yeah, just be bold enough to respond to what he says. Please like and share this video and subscribe to City Heart's YouTube channel. And we love you guys, and we'll see you next time on After the Message.
God bless.
Bye.